Shabbat Shalom. So one of the things that always tends to confuse people as they learn more about Judaism is what I like to call Jewish choreography. There is a lot that is on the page of our Siddurim, of our prayer books, which tells you exactly what words to say, even tells you why we say them in many places. But it doesn't always tell you what you should be doing while you are doing the words. That is to say, do we stand? Do we turn, as we did to greet Shabbat Kala, to greet the Sabbath bride towards the doorway? Do we bow? Do we bow left and right? Do we bow right then left? Do we go up on our toes? Do we bend our knees? Do we bend our neck? Do we bend our waist? There is a lot of choreography. But one thing where people seem to think there is unanimity is standing. At least there we can agree. Whether we're turning or twisting or not, we know when we're supposed to stand, right? Good. Let's have a quick quiz. So I'll give you the name of a different part of our service, and you tell me whether we are standing or not standing. Good? Excellent. Aleinu. Standing. All right, that one wasn't so bad. What about doing the Shema? Sitting. That one is actually pretty clear from the discussion within Halacha. We sit for the Shema. Aleinu, we stand. The Amidah. Stand. It's literally called standing. It would be a little surprising if we weren't standing for it. The Baruch. Stand. But what about the Baruch during each Torah blessing? But what about the Baruch at the beginning of Shacharit and Mariv? We're going to have to come back to that one. All right, we'll try a nice easy one. The Kaddish. Now we move into the gray territory of Minhag. Kaddish is perhaps one of the most famous sections of our prayers. Yitkabal v'yikabash. You can almost get a Pavlovian response from any regular shul goer. Say those first four words, you will get an amen. It is beautifully conditioned into us. But whether we are supposed to be standing or sitting is something that many people either take for granted or feel confused and simply wait for the rabbi to announce or to watch what other people are doing. And you will see hesitancy over this. And you shouldn't feel too bad about it, because when we look through the law codes, we see that this is an area of much discussion. Not debate, as we'll discover, but definitely discussion. The simplest way to explain it is that among the Sephardim, they do not feel the need to stand for anything except for the Amidah, whether it be the Baruch, Torah service, or at the start of a section of a service. It is not obligatory to stand. And so too for the Kaddish. There is no obligation to stand for the Kaddish. Classically, among the Ashkenazic world, you stand for the Baruch and you stand for every Kaddish. Done. However, when we look into the Ashkenazic law codes, and we do generally follow the Ashkenazic traditions within this congregation, we can see that even within the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which if you're not familiar with, is a condensed version, hence the phrase Kitzur, of the much longer Shulchan Aruch, where one of the primary jobs that the author saw as his task was to remove all of the doubt, to remove all of the, there are some who say and there are some who say, that are found within the original Shulchan Aruch, to distill it to the bottom line, do this, answers, even where in the original there were more options. And yet, when you come to the passage about the Kaddish, he hedges. Even this great distiller of Ashkenazic custom, who has no problem saying A, only, B, only for other topics, when it comes to the Kaddish, all of a sudden he's giving us choices. And he says, well, even within the Ashkenazic world, there are some who stand for every Kaddish. Everybody Doesn't matter which Kaddish it is, Chatzi Kaddish, Kaddish Shalem, but we call it Kaddish Yatom, Kaddish D'Rabbanan. If the Kaddish is being said, you are on your feet. Full stop, period. But there are also those that will stand for a Kaddish if they were already standing. Meaning, if you have reached a section of the service where you are already on your feet, classic example being the recitation of Hallel, and that has come to a conclusion, you shouldn't rush to sit down before the Kaddish is recited by the Shliach Tzibur, by the service leader. But instead, the Kaddish has caught you standing, and you shouldn't sit down because it would seem almost rude to sit down if you had already been standing before. It would be like somebody honored coming into the room and you choosing to have a seat rather than greet them on your feet. Indeed, he cites the great Midrash taken from the story of Shoftim, of the judges, where Ehud goes to our Canaanite foe and he approaches him under, shall we say, false pretenses, and having hidden a dagger within his clothes, he says, I have a message for you from Adonai. And the Canaanite gets to his feet. Ehud then assassinates him in beautiful and descriptive language, and then escapes. But this is teaching us, says the Midrash, that even a Canaanite pagan idolater would get on his feet to hear a message from God. How much more so if you're on your feet, should you stay on your feet if you are about to hear a praise of God, if you are about to hear the Kaddish? So what is the custom at Temple Israel? No, that is not the custom at Temple Israel. The custom at Temple Israel is not stand for every Kaddish. Indeed, I have never been in an American Ashkenazic community where that was the custom. It may have been the custom at some point in Lithuania or in Poland or in some parts of Germany, but it is not the standard American practice, at least within conservative synagogues. Instead, the practice tends to be, if you're already standing, go ahead and stay standing. But if you're seated before the Kaddish begins, you are under no obligation to rise. It is a compromise position between the Sephardic version and the Ashkenazic version, or at least one of the Ashkenazic versions. Correct. Exactly, which is why there are exceptions to this. If it is the Chatzi Kaddish, there is no obvious reason why a person would need to stand, yet it is the minhag, it is the custom of almost all Ashkenazic communities to ask that everybody rise, not just for the honor of Kaddish, but in order to show the mark between the main aliyot and the maftir that is about to be read. And so that standing provides a convenient line of demarcation between those sections of the Torah service. And with regards to Kaddish Yatom or Kaddish D'Rabbanan, when they are being recited by mourners, we are not asking them to stand for the Kaddish. We are asking them to stand because they are leading the Kaddish. And everybody agrees that if you are the leader, that you should be standing for the Kaddish. The question is only in doubt when you are one of the congregants that is responding to the words of the Kaddish. And so, yes, within Temple Israel, the custom is that if it has been declared you should rise, then you rise for the Kaddish. But otherwise, if you were seated before the Kaddish began, you should remain seated throughout the recitation. But here comes the wrinkle. What happens if you are from Temple Israel and you visit let's say a different tradition of an Ashkenazic synagogue where they stand for every Kaddish? You are there for a bar mitzvah. You're there for some other simcha, joyous occasion. And in that community, you quickly notice that everybody's getting up for every Kaddish. What do you, a good member of Temple Israel who's just visiting, how do you respond when you're in that congregation? Yes, Nathaniel? You respect their choice, and you do the same. When you are in a place, a makom, you rise according to minhag hamakom, according to the custom of the place. You do not say, well, I think that the most appropriate thing to do is to remain seated unless you happen to have already been standing, And that's what I think is most logical, and since that is what is right, when I'm among you, I'm going to do what I think is right. And no, that's not what you do. And it works in reverse. If someone from a community where the custom is to stand for each and every Kaddish comes and visits congregation Temple Israel, and it is time for a Kaddish where the community at large would not be standing, what should the visitor do? Keep their tuchas on the bench. Stay seated. Now that may sound easy, but it's actually can be very hard. There is a tendency to feel that somehow if I have been observing what might be considered a stringency by putting the effort into rising, that if I'm not doing it as a guest, that I am somehow diminishing what I would normally be doing, that I'm not paying proper respect to God. But we don't pay proper respect to God by insulting the community that we are attending. We are not showing proper respect to the community, and by extension, we are not showing proper respect to how it is reaching out to God. When we are dealing with minhagim, customs, not with halakha, that is a whole other issue, which is a much longer discussion. But when we are dealing with customs in which there is great diversity, as it says in Proverbs, a wise man has eyes in his head. You see what is, in Kohelet, you see what is going on around you, and you take it in, and you use that to understand. If everybody else is standing, you stand. If everybody else is sitting, you sit. It's provided there's not an actual contradiction to halakha. And when it comes to Kaddish, as I've already said, there isn't halakha of you must stand or you must sit. You must follow the custom of the place. This is part of what Judaism teaches us. It teaches us that being a good Jewish person is not just about what you have decided to do, about your commitment to your understanding of the Torah. It is about your willingness to be part of a community, because something unique about Kaddish and Baruch and the Amidah is they can only be done within a community. They can only be done with a minyan. They can only be done with the quorum of 10 at least. And if you are willing to recognize that these can only be done as a group, then you must be willing to recognize that the group has the authority to decide how they will be done with the group. This blend of both being an individual who comprises an element of the group and an individual that is willing to accept the rule of the group is part of the dance that Judaism has asked us to participate in for thousands of years, to be both ourselves and to also be ourselves. And nowhere do we see this more clearly than in the customs of our prayer. As we go throughout the service, you may find things that are different than what you are used to. You may find things that are perfectly comfortable. But as you continue to participate in a way that is in harmony with not only halakha, but the minhag makom, the custom of the place, realize that we are being bound more and more together in that shared experience. Shabbat Shalom.